we will be discussing this vision within the context of ocean and islands and the work that all of us do. And so all of us do touch this work. I'll briefly mention that Oceanic Global is an ocean conservation nonprofit. We focus on behavior change, engaging with grassroots communities, driving sustainable business leadership, working with industries, and driving policy reform in coalition and building connections across the globe. So with that, we'll turn it over to each of our speakers to share a short introduction of what they do, weaving in oceans, loss and damage, and the value of Indigenous peoples, diversity in climate solutions in particular too, within the context of what we all do. So I'll first pass it over, Kahea, to you.
Aloha mai kākou, o Kahea Ko'uinoa no Honua mai au, makamaku o ke ave o ia ho'i ma ka makupuni o Hawaii nei. Hello everyone, hello Kasia, thank you so much for that beautiful poem to really ground us in the conversation. It's storming here. I'm Kanaka Maoli, or Native Hawaiian, and I'm from a small community called Honolulu on the eastern side of the island of Hawaii. So my ancestors and my family come from the Mokua district of Ka'u on Hawaii Island, and we're experiencing a lot of storm right now. I have a beautiful window right in front of me, and just the rain has been coming down. I got to be out in the rain this morning. So really feeling that connection, so thank you. I am the co-executive director at Women's Earth Alliance, and we are a 16-year global initiative and network on a mission to protect our environment and the climate crisis and ensure a just and thriving world by empowering women's leadership. Since 2006, we've been at the forefront of intersectional feminist climate action, working at the critical nexus of gender, racial, environmental, and economic justice, because we fundamentally believe that one cannot happen without all the others. And through our programming, we serve grassroots women leaders, many of whom are Indigenous women, grassroots leaders like my colleague Tasha, who I'm so honored to be on this panel with today. And the leaders we serve are at the helm of initiatives to address climate change and build community resilience, protect our oceans, forests, and ecosystems, as well as land rights for women and Indigenous communities, ensure water conservation and access, launch sustainable eco enterprises, practice regenerative agriculture, innovate pathways to just transition, and more. And we do this because we recognize that if we are committed to environmental sustainability, if we are continuing to see around the world that women, Indigenous people, and local communities are stewarding the oceans and the land most effectively, then there's no better strategy to achieve sustainability than to work with those communities and amplify their leadership. At the heart of every environmental and climate movement in communities around the world are women at the grassroots, showing up, committed for the long haul. And for them, this work of stewarding our oceans and addressing the climate crisis, it's more than a job. It's for the sake of their families and communities, for the sake of the earth, and for the sake of all the future generations that will inherit it. So thank you so much for having me here today for this really important dialogue.
Thank you for that, Kahea. It was wonderful. And yeah, it's so incredible to have Tasha here as well, who is linked with the Women's Earth Alliance. So pass it over to you, Tasha, for your intro.
Thank you, Kasia, and hi, Kahea. So I would like to say thank you very much for Sea Change Climate to invite me to this panel. So hi everyone, and good evening or good. It's very 3 a.m. here from Bali, Indonesia. So my name is Prawita Tasya Karisa, but you can call me Tasya. I'm the executive director and co-founder of BioRock Indonesia. So BioRock Indonesia is a organization. It's a planet organization, both non-profits and also profits, that we are working for restoring coral reefs and shore protection in Indonesia. The reason why we are doing this is we know that the ocean, the coral reefs is only half in the world, and it's even in Indonesia is more than 2/3 of it are destroyed. So we would like to see in the future that communities and organizations that we are working together and to engage them in a technology called BioRock, using low voltage electricity, that we can work together in restoring coral restoration and also protect the ocean. So we can see that communities and also ocean are thriving in the future. And we are working in 4 programs. We have working on science. We are also involving youth in it's called Scholar Reef, that we give scholarship to youth that work on science and monitoring our coral reefs and also interview local people. And we also have a bio garden that actually plant the corals to make it more a coral garden and everybody can enjoy. And also we have the shore protection that using the same technology to install in a eroded beach, and we hope to keep all the sands together, and we would like to see the beach growing instead of collapsing. And the last is fire experience, where we are inviting all people from around the world coming to our sites and enjoy the experience, while also you are helping with the local community by staying and experiencing with them. So that's all, I think, Kezia. So hopefully we can have more fluid discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha, for that background and for your work. Really incredible and so needed to be focusing on corals. We shared in the prep conversation, but actually I have another part of my life was spent doing coral restoration. So it's really good to reconnect and to see how the work continues and grows and is pollinating around the world too. Kahea, I'll turn back to you and just to ask a bit more about WEA, about Women's Earth Alliance, as the mission is so inherently aligned with this entire She Changes Summit and the call to action with the letter that we're driving towards here as well. And so would love to just hear a bit more from you, how you empower women around the world, what kind of support is needed, and the way that you are creating this mycelial network of empowerment.
Of course, I love that too, the mycelial network. We often think of that, think of our work in that way and use that terminology. So thank you for bringing that up. So at WEA's founding meeting in 2006, 30 women leaders from 26 countries gathered together to create a framework really for transforming the world. The invitation was to come be a part of designing a global initiative that would connect, resource, and catalyze the work of grassroots women fighting to protect our environment. The invitation was to come and create something that didn't yet exist in this space, which is a home for feminist climate leadership. This wasn't going to be about meeting quotas for women's representation or women as target beneficiaries of massive international development schemes. You know, those attempts had been done before, for better or worse. But this in WEA was about meeting an urgent and intersectional resource gap. Founding mothers all observed the same thing, even though their contexts were different. They observed that women environmental leaders were underrepresented in decision-making spaces like COP and others, unrecognized in the larger environmental movement and in media, and under-resourced really in every way compared to their male counterparts. And the worst part was that they were cut off from each other. And they were doing this work without the mentorship or the solidarity of a network. And even then, they were still making things happen. They were strategic, resourceful, and collaborative. And so that's the model that we designed 16 years ago. And it's one that seeks out grassroots women leaders working on the front lines to protect their community's natural resources, their livelihoods, and health. Then it invests in their long-term leadership through training, funding, and networks of support. And you know, our work is founded upon these deep and long-term partnerships with women leaders like Tasha and their initiatives, because the initiatives, you know, we know they're making a difference in their communities and have what it takes to scale that to a global impact if availed of the technical leadership and advocacy training, the mentorship, the funding, and the support and recognition they would have if all things were equal. And you know, it's arguable, but I believe that the support, the alliance aspects of our work is some of the most critical. It provides frontline women leaders with communities of practice, with a sisterhood, with cross-region pollination of solutions, and with the knowledge that we're not alone. We're not doing this alone. And we see this model and supporting this model of work and supporting feminist leadership as the most critical investment we can make in the world, because we know that when women leaders have the tools, access, resources, and recognition they need, everyone benefits. The ripple effect just spreads. You know, women are empowered, kids are safer, communities are healthier, our natural resources regenerate, local economies prosper, and that's when real change happens. So that's Via's work.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I was just taking notes there and feeling goosebumps. I align with so much of what you shared, and also going back to what you shared at the beginning, just acknowledging that women already are at the front and center of so much of this work. And so, as you mentioned, a major piece is even just recognition and just calling out and acknowledging women who have been doing this work and who have been in positions of leadership when that hasn't necessarily been acknowledged as something beyond perhaps doing one's duty to family or to community, or fulfilling the archetype of a role that a woman or feminine identifying person fulfills within society. And that can be so constraining as well. And to not have the dignity too of being recognized as a leader for making those sacrifices and doing that work. So that's just something that really came through with what you shared, and love the idea of community of practice. I know that's something we spoke about in our prep conversation too, but just the idea that there are people tackling similar challenges in different contexts around the world. And while every case is unique, there is so much that we can learn from each other. If it's ways to approach government, if it's ways to organize, even if it's the kind of language to use to socialize these initiatives and to get others on board. And yeah, I think I know I mentioned that at the beginning, but I think that's such a major strength of feminine leadership in general, is to rely on each other and not need to be the loudest voice in the room, but to recognize, oh, this work has already started. Okay, let's continue and grow from where that is. Beautiful. Yeah. And on that, I'll pass it, Tasha. I'd love to hear more from your perspective as a WIA recipient, and to hear a little bit more about the work that you're leading, and perhaps also your experience with, engaging with the Alliance, the community, that network of WIA. What support was or continues to be most supportive and effective for you as well?
Yeah, so Kezia, WIA and I meet at the right time at the moment. So at that time I was like accepting the position of the BIROC Indonesia. At that time was still in a country coordinator. At that time it wasn't an organization yet. So the co-inventor of the technology just appointed me, like, oh my God, what should I do? Like, I don't know how to run at the national level. I mean, I was working on a project base, like in this village on that province, but how I'm going to manage on the national level, I don't know. And that's when I met somebody from WIA Indonesia at that time, invited me to join this opportunity. I said, yes, I would like to join. And that's like an eye-opening for me, that it's really at the top of position. Like at that time I was alone and nobody teach me how to do this. But at WIA I met other sister who actually doing it on the same difficulties like with me, but we have sharing different knowledge, different experience. So we empower each other, because I have these skills, but I don't have that skill. So I exchange that skill from other leaders or around Indonesia at the time from WIA. And it's true that I met different levels, from the grassroots to the province and then to the ministry. So unfortunately, most of the women leaders also experience this. So most of all the leaders from the grassroots, I mean the village leaders, also the policymakers, are all male. So it's really difficult, like hanging out with them, like trying to break the ice, because what they do is like a male conversation. They smoking, they do the male things to make things worse, and we didn't do that. I'm still, at the time I still remember, I was pregnant and delivering my baby, so I had to nurse her in my every project, and like still I have to talk with the smoking guy. And it was in the village meeting, so it's really difficult to do that. So it's really helpful to receive like a network and also a training from VIA at that time, because there are no one that provide that kind of help that maybe not VIA, just VIA, but other organization that focus on women leadership, especially in the top position, is really needed, because we cannot do it alone. So that's my point of view.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that's so vivid also to just visualize, that room full of men smoking, and you're just trying to nurse your child, and it's just not the environment that feels comfortable. And I think that's that's such a metaphor for more broadly this male dominated culture, and how it's not as designed to be inclusive, even when you already are in that position of power. And in this case, you're working at the national level, and these are more localized leaders. So in some sense, you have a broader perspective, and yet there's still this dynamic that takes shape, just generational. And but I'm so glad to hear, though, that the support of other women and just sharing stories, I think can be supportive, as you mentioned, Kahea, that we're not alone. And I know, just as people who work in ocean and environmental spaces more broadly, anyone can have that sense that one is working alone or in a silo, because it feels like there is so much to do and to feel pushed back and what's possible. So I think that's particularly true for minority communities, particularly women, and any who identify in that way. I am just wondering if we maybe got one more panelist, but we'll see if they join and hope that they do. So Kahea, I'll pass it back to you. Actually, a question for both of you, as we were talking about this too, just from that perspective, what inspires you most about the work that you do? And that can relate to the ocean, that can relate to environmental action, that can relate to empowering women, whatever really gets you out of bed in the morning. But what inspired you from the beginning, if you'd like to share, and what continues to inspire you?
Can I jump in, Tasha? Because what inspires me is almost exactly what you were talking about in what you just shared. I think I'm inspired most in the work that I do and that WIA does, is seeing the powerful change that's possible when we allow women leaders to bring their whole selves to the work. On a very personal note, just by way of example, back in 2020, I was an associate director here at WIA. I'd been here for almost a decade. And I was just about 1 week from heading out on months of parental leave to have my second child. And that's when Melinda Kramer and Amira Diamond, who are our co-founders and who are now my fellow co-directors, called and asked me to join them as a co-director of Women's Earth Alliance. So, at a time in a woman's life where she's often penalized for attending to the work of caring for herself and her family, we celebrated and honored that step I was taking, regardless of the fact that I was about to be away for so long. And not only is that really emblematic of the kind of culture WIA creates and nurtures within our organization, but more importantly, of the kind of world we see as necessary if we're going to achieve gender and climate justice. Women leaders have been standing on the front lines, protecting their families, communities, and the earth, innovating sustainable solutions to social and ecological crises, all while being, all while being mothers and artists and musicians and activists and organizers and healers and teachers and more, and nursing their children. And, too often the systems we live in require us to mold ourselves to fit into a very specific patriarchal and extractive model of leadership. And we've been conditioned to do that. But as we can see by the current state of our societies and our climate, that model of leadership is not working, and that's okay. And I will say, while we mold ourselves into that, I'm so honored to be in spaces with leaders like Tasha, who will be in that kind of environment, who will still be like, I'm still a mom, I'm still gonna nurse my child, this is what's gonna happen, but that kind of leadership that's telling us that that's not the right space, or we shouldn't be doing that, it's not working. And that's okay, because it's not the only, nor is it the most effective leadership model this world has ever seen. There are feminist leadership models. Many Indigenous communities have long utilized matriarchal leadership models. There are models that value power sharing and collaboration and intuition and self and community care. And I'm inspired each day here at WIA because I see us modeling and honoring that kind of leadership in the world. And it really brings me so much joy to see the ways that makes room for powerful change.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, love that. Tasha, you're on mute, but would love to hear what inspires you.
I think what inspires me is almost everything about life. I was close with my parents, but with my father the most, and he inspired me that living a life itself is already a gift from the God. So what inspired me every day is like I realized that everybody have a reason for a living, and for the past maybe 2 or 3 decades in my life, each of us have our own path, and sometimes we would like to go outside from what we are doing, but all the paths are put me back to where I am now. So it's almost like the God saying me that this is your path, this is you are going to do with your life. So I'm trying to embrace it, and I would like to make a legacy for my children, for my country, for the earth, because I was watching that how other people doing to restore the ocean, restore the coral reefs, and I just see that I think I can do it, not better, but probably I can contribute more to that. So maybe this is what I'm going to do with my life, and to provide what I can do to the other people and to the environment. So I think celebrating life is what's inspiring the most, Cassia.
I love that so much. Yeah, celebrating life. I mean, that's it, isn't it? Just celebrating life, creating a space that we can all live happily and in healthy ways for future generations. That's really the simplest goal, I think, if I'll agree. And what we're seeking towards is that collective well-being and the continuity of life. Both of you are mothers and sharing those stories here, and that's so rich and potent and beautiful. All right, I'll just tag on because I love that you called out, Kahea. With a lot of the work Oceanic Global does, it's empowering local leaders to take action, whether in a grassroots setting or to engage with businesses in their community and drive change in the tourism sector or hospitality. And what's been most empowering and inspiring for me, that gets me out of bed, is to see the inspiration of all who take on that fire, who take that light and lead their own charge as leaders, and find that strength within themselves. And that, to me, is the most exciting to see, through training or sharing tools, all the elements that you've mentioned, through sharing this connected community and being able to lean on each other. That for me has been the most inspiring. And just to also loop back, Tasha, to what you had shared earlier, just about the presence, I think the gender dimension of roles. What's interesting is, being in the nonprofit space, there are quite a few, there's good representation of women in the nonprofit space for the most part, particularly within ocean and environmental efforts. And so it's quite common that around a table, the nonprofit voices are women and the government and private sector voices are men. And that is shifting, and that's starting to shift. And, we're seeing that, but that tends to be the dynamic. And so when people who are positions of decision-making power or monetary financial power versus those who are reliant on those elements, there is that other dimension, which just feels present. To your point earlier, Kahea, about the leadership structures that are in place in dominant cultures. They're not the only ones that exist. And there are so many others where that table can feel truly a roundtable discussion, where power is more decentralized, less hierarchical, and can be more co-created. And we are starting to see how that's manifesting, just even in the way we're choosing to live, to purchase food, to organize, to self-organize. But yeah, I figured it would be worth just calling that out, just from our experience too. And yeah, what we're talking about in some lens when we're saying these gendered leadership structures. And yeah, how that can either feel safe or not, and invite voices to the table or not. And to not have those voices at the table means we will not have the most biodiverse, the most rich sense of ideas. And, you know, as we're seeing also in nature, as we're losing biodiversity, we're losing ecosystem health. And so the two are interrelated. But with that, I would love to go back to Kahea with some specific questions. I have one more question for each of you, and then we're a group discussion. But just if there was a specific moment or project that you found most rewarding. I know we've been speaking at a higher level, but if you just want to dive in, of course, Tasha is here, but if there's perhaps another one you'd like to bring into the conversation, just a moment you found really rewarding and empowering, that stuck with you.
Absolutely, and I will let Tasha speak about her project because it is so inspiring and special. But she will obviously have the best words for it. But I think the work overall is really fulfilling, and we've built a team where it feels like we're all called to this work because of our passion and dedication to the mission. You know, this isn't a job for the people on our team in the NER Global Alliance. This is the way we're able to place ourselves in the world and give of ourselves to really make a difference. But in addition to that, I come to this work from a legal background. So in law school, I specialized in international human rights and federal Indian law. And during that time, a big focus for me as a young Indigenous woman was looking at sexual violence committed against Indigenous women here in the US and the jurisdictional loopholes in our system that sacrifice the safety and lives of you know, Native women and my sisters so callously. So when I joined Women's Earth Alliance and after a few years, began seeing in my work these rumblings about the intersection of violence against Native women and extractive industries, I immediately felt pulled to this body of work. You know, intersectionality is a huge part of our work at WIA, and the recognition that climate justice and environmental justice aren't possible without gender justice, without racial justice, without economic justice, and without a real reckoning with our country's and the world's colonial history. That's central to our theory of change. So when we began asking our Indigenous colleagues and community members about what we were hearing in terms of increased violence being experienced by Indigenous women, you know, in and around sites of resource exploitation, it ended up that, yes, this is something that's real and dangerous and not being talked about in mainstream media. And I knew this was something then that I needed us to mobilize around in whatever way we could. And things have changed. We've started to see this more in mainstream media in the past few years. This initiative took place really around 2013 to 2017. But in the way that we typically forms partnerships and programs is we reached out and asked our alliance who we should get in touch with to, you know, just to listen at first, who's doing the critical work on the ground, excuse me, and has been talking about this crisis. And eventually I spoke with Native Youth Sexual Health Network, which is an organization based by and for Indigenous youth that works across issues of sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice. And we connected over what I think with this summit, we're seeing is an ongoing challenge in our movements, and that's the siloing of our issues. You know, things are slowly changing, but still so often we see gender being addressed, you know, over here, Indigenous rights over here, climate change over here, as if these are not intrinsically linked and dependent upon one another. And that intersectionality is where WIA Emissions Research Initiative and the tools it produced was really born. So the Violence on the Land, Violence in Our Bodies report and toolkit explored the connections between the health and safety of Indigenous lands and the health and safety of Indigenous women, youth, and Two-Spirit. And our initiative team spent 2 years just really deeply listening to the stories of women, youth, and Two-Spirits in impacted communities. And what we learned was that women and young people are severely impacted by climate change inducing industries like extractive oil and gas projects. Many of the communities where these projects are located became sites of chemical manufacturing and waste dumping. And you know, we call them sacrifice zones. We call these homes, these places that were once territories of life, we call them sacrifice zones now. And women in these communities, many of whom are Indigenous women or women of color, hold a cumulative body burden of pollutants that are in their immediate surrounding environment, which can be passed on to the next generation through breast milk, And other impacted communities have seen, large encampments of men who work for the gas and oil industry. And the devastating impacts of this environmental violence ranges from, sexual and domestic violence, increased drug and alcohol use, murders and disappearances, reproductive illnesses and toxic exposure, threats to culture and indigenous lifeways, crime, and more. And so the results of the years spent listening to community and being in community and learning about what they were identifying as the support they needed was this report and toolkit. And so that's what's most rewarding about being a part of this initiative. The toolkit, for example, is full of community-based resources. There's workshop templates, an environmental violence assessment, suggestions for traditional medicines to address violence or trauma that can be made nation-specific, that were gathered from elders and grandmothers and medicine people. And, where the report and toolkit could have taken a very different approach, a very almost standard approach, recommending stricter laws and carceral approaches to violence, for example. That wasn't what the community members we talked with asked for. They asked for Indigenous-based resources, and that's what we helped them to gather. And so the report and toolkit are still available for free to anyone and everyone on our website. And it's just one of those projects that really was incredibly special to me and a deep learning experience for me as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And Kahea, it seems like you've lived multiple lives in all those projects you mentioned in your journey with your law background and engaging with youth and just across the other elements. And there's a lot of love in the chat for intersectionality, and fully agree with that, and really inspired by the way that you approach that. If you have the capacity to pull that link as we're chatting, that would be incredible. Otherwise, I'm sure we can make sure to circulate that with the organizers following. I'm sure that's something that all might find interesting to share with their communities. And just to double click, if you will, on what you shared about the intersectionality, from our experience too, that has been so accurate, whatever lens you're coming from. If you're recognizing social inequalities or environmental injustices, the two tend to be completely layered. In places where we are not fundamentally respecting humans, we are certainly not respecting the planet. And oftentimes it really even begins with ourselves, finding that sense of self-love and respect and health and well-being, which seems to be clearly lacking in dominant culture as we look at mental health issues and inability to even care for each other and create systems of communities that are truly cohesive. And so really recognize the work that you were doing there, just, looking at the way we treat land and the way that we treat bodies, and specifically women and children within that. So thank you for shining that light and for putting it in the chat so quick. So that's in there. Amazing. Tasha, if you would like to answer the same question, if there was like really a moment that inspired you. The other question that I had, if maybe you want to weave it together, was just also, we've been speaking about these global alliances, being able to lean on each other and not recreate the wheel, learn from each other. And so just curious, beyond WIA, if there have been other global networks, if you're in touch with coral restoration advocates around the world, if that's been a part of your practice or inspiration too.
Yes, thank you, Cassia. So the thing is, and the ugly truth is, we working in a non-profit sector, especially in the conservation, in the coral reefs itself, is I feel like it more on the competition, even though we are working on the same sector. So there are several organizations that are trying to be the best solution for the corals, the best method how to grow corals. But what I think is that everybody have different approach, everybody have different solutions. So I think it would be best if we work together. But again, unfortunately, the atmosphere was not there for the ocean and for the corals, especially for the there are several section or specialized, like someone focus on the research only, someone focus on the technical only, and more on the community only. And each of these specialization sometimes little bit of stubborn to see only on their point of view, and really hard to put them together on how we actually see over our expertise. So it's really difficult to put them to see on the big goal on the 50 years ahead. It's really difficult on that level. However, I'm also involved in non head-to-head technology or organization. We are also part of the AIS, or Archipelagic and Island States. It's a forum of country where country with the small island states with archipelago, like maybe like Tonga, Maldives, Indonesia. We are discussing together of the solution for the oceans. And I'm part also for the, even though it's not related, but I'm also part of the women future female business leaders. So there are international network that connects us, our business leaders, women business leaders all around the world. I think that's where the atmosphere, I think, is more friendlier, more supportive. That's I'm not sure whether Cassia, you or Kahia feel it or not, but on the nonprofit sector, it's very fierce for the competition, for the, I don't know, for getting the donors, the donation, while in the profit sector, it's more like supportive and everybody is supplying each other needs. So I really wish that it doesn't matter whether it's profit or non-profit, but it's really helpful. It will be really useful if we are providing the same atmosphere of, you know, working together and how we can support each other. But I think it can be started, I don't know, from VIA or from Cassia, you work in Oceanic Global. So can you set up this atmosphere that we are not competing, but instead of working each other? So that's
together.
yes, but not actually on the other leaders. Maybe we can set a trend. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for your honesty. Thank you so much for your honesty and for just being real, because something I was talking about earlier this week too. But so yeah, so going back to masculine inspired lack of inspiration, perhaps, leadership structures and the vision of the world that we live in. The world wants us to be in competition in so many ways, especially nonprofits, to have us competing with a scarcity mindset, a lack mindset coming from lack. There are limited number of resources, there are limited source of funders, there are limited ways that we can be working here. And to your point, the private sector actually does not feel that sense of lack. I had a long conversation with a friend who's in the investment world, and he was like, well, nature is abundant and so is wealth and finance, and you just have to find ways to leverage this. We're making up the rules of the economy as we go, and there's ways to set our collective values that are different. And so to your point, I think, unfortunately, the reality is that the nonprofit sector is quite cutthroat and competitive, and would welcome any support and partnership in changing that. And I think that does come. And so that's where it's not just physically embodying or identifying as a woman, it's also feminine leadership, and recognizing in what ways are we catering to the masculine dominated rules that exist, or how are we truly finding ways to change that, and recognizing change is painful, and transitions can be painful in that way too. And so being ready to face what that might mean, on, you know, making that shift, or perhaps losing some opportunities, or things along those lines, but ultimately being able to build that future and being able to lean on each other. So thank you for that call to action. And yeah, we are here and ready to build that with you all. And I think a lot of others in the chat are agreeing with that too. And I know, sadly, somehow we're already running out of time here, but I think we've really covered a lot of what we wanted to touch upon regarding barriers, how to overcome some of those barriers, how to create alternative systems, as well as looking at this through an ocean-focused lens. The last question that I have is what you all are optimistic about, and we actually have kept this quite an optimistic conversation, thinking about those solutions and tools. And before opening that up, also, if anyone does have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We will bring you in if we can, and just address those as well. Oh, we do. We have more space than I thought. Great. Perfect. But I do just want to actually address something that we're seeing in the chat too, and just, really a focus on looking at temperature increases and emission reductions. And I can speak just from my perspective, this has really been the narrative of the climate COPs. The first climate COP took place the year that I was born in 1995. And I think we've seen the evolutions that have taken place since then, lack thereof as well. And I think perhaps part of bringing a feminine lens on this is redefining how we consider impact. What do we consider? How can we storytell impact? How can we set these country commitments to be perhaps more practical, more focused on empowering those intersectional alignments rather than these numbers, but could it also be a bit more focused on empowering communities that are in how do we change the way that coastal communities are feeling and preparing, responding to these disasters that are taking place, and considering how we center nature as a solution within that too. Are there ways that that can be influenced and integrated in a way that perhaps is not so masculine, technical, numbers oriented, but could perhaps be a bit more qualitative? That's just a challenge that I would offer to those in the chat, sharing those notes, and to us here. And again, that's my perspective. I'll just hold that as mine. I'm not projecting this, but just a question that I have as we think about redefining these systems that have not been effective thus far. But with that, okay, and Tasha, if there's anything you want to respond to on that, or if you want to share more about what inspires you as well, or what you're optimistic about. That's right.
Sure. I can say that, what you were just saying about the different ways we're tracking impact, that is absolutely something we think about. So one of the aspects of training we offer the women leaders in our alliance is around kind of impact tracking and impact framework. But we're very conscious of wanting to democratize impact as well, letting communities and community leaders define what impact looks like and track those. So one of the things that we see our role is supporting that to happen, and then still being that almost that intermediary where we can then we'll translate our numbers into whatever the system needs in order to bring the funding so we can support women leaders as we work to really shift the way the world tracks impact and thinks about impact and thinks about what is worthy enough to be supported and what solutions have enough evidence behind them, even though these solutions from communities, from women, from Indigenous communities have been the only thing we've seen to be able to sustainably steward this planet. We're constantly trying to find, different sort of contemporary innovations when I often ask myself, why can't we just bridge traditional science and traditional innovation with contemporary resources and contemporary innovation to really scale those solutions, to really bring them to life in communities. But that's going off. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on another tangent. What am I optimistic about?
That was perfect.
Let me return to that. I am optimistic about everything. When we don't find reasons to remain optimistic, to continue doing this work from a place of joy rather than anger or fear. And joy is a big thing. It's one of our core values as an organization. We sing and we celebrate at all of our gatherings. It's, as Tasha well knows, there's often songs and dancing. But if we stay stuck in that sort of, the doom narratives that are flying around these days, then we just help to maintain the status quo. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Too often the idea that it's too late to make a difference also serves as a way to excuse ourselves and those most at fault for the climate crisis. It's like, well, things are so terrible, but there's nothing we can do to change it. So things just keep going, really, business as usual, and you rinse and repeat. But for many women, and particularly, women of color, Indigenous women, and those in the global South who are already on the front lines of climate change and environmental devastation, sitting in that it's too late kind of pessimistic paralysis of the climate crisis it's a privilege, frankly, that they can't afford. Theirs are the communities that are hit hardest by the compounding effects of climate change, environmental violence, racism, and systemic economic disenfranchisement. And, you know, for grassroots women who are often responsible for caring for the families, like we've been talking about, and stewarding, you know, and building resilience in the face of climate crisis, that's a matter of survival. And it makes me think of this story, you know, in 2021, our co-founder Melinda Kramer was at the University of Nairobi and was able to attend the guest lecture by Dr. Wangari Maathai. And so after that lecture, she had a chance to meet Dr. Maathai, who ended up being on our International Advisory Council for many years. And she was able to thank her for her leadership and ask, you know, what needs to be done? What do we need to do in the world to really make change? And Dr. Maathai said, what we need to do is simple. We just plant seeds of all kinds, and you'll be amazed at how they grow. And I just love that story because that's the attitude I encounter every day with working with grassroots women leaders. And that's what keeps me optimistic. Their optimism, their resilience, their hope, and their conviction really help to continue to instill those in me.
Thank you for that, Kahea. That's amazing. And such a really good point on, you know, a fight that's necessary for someone or optional for another, and how we think about that. I also love what you mentioned about joy. And so just to call in, Adrienne Marie Brown's book on pleasure activism is just one that I found quite potent, and just a reminder in finding joy in this movement to be more sustainable. There was an article I think that came out a few years ago looking at what emotion can spark action, but they were all negative emotions. It was basically grief versus anger. And the result was anger is more likely to light that fire in your belly to drive action, where grief could be paralyzing to what you were saying, that we've got 10 years left, it's doomsday, and the eco-anxiety that we're seeing, which is now in the dictionary as a term because it's this pandemic that our younger generation is feeling. And so those were the two comparisons. But I was wondering, where is joy? Yeah, where is optimism? Where is hope? Where does that fit in? Because that is what, in many ways, is driving people. Where is love? Yes. Oh, thank you, Kaya. Yeah. But yeah, I had it to wake up and do this every day. And my other, again, personal, but rejection against the ticking time clock is just that that doesn't honor the intergenerational effort this has already been and will continue to be. And this is not something to be solved in many ways, that this will continue to, this is a maintenance, a growing, and every day waking up with and being able to pass the baton when needed and leaning on each other. But still, this is something that every generation will have to recommit themselves to, intentionally creating the community they want to live in. And that's not something that will just suddenly stop in a decade, or won't suddenly stop when we lose a certain number of species or when a certain amount of land is underwater. It's something that we will continue to have to live with ourselves around. And so I think that whole framing around what we're doing and how we speak about climate action can evolve there too. Yeah. Tasha, any thoughts on anything? I think just wide open, but also the question was what makes you optimistic too? But yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm quite optimistic that especially in Indonesia, like actually I'm overwhelmed with the amount of people or organization who would like to support or help how to save corals. Like from the grassroots level, from the village, from the government, from the entrepreneur, like everybody wants to be involved. It just, when Kahea talk about impact, I remember something. Like Dr. Wangari Maathai said that it's easy, just plant a tree. In our terms, like it's easy, just plant a coral. The thing is, it's not that easy in the ocean. Maybe Cassia understand. Before we can transplant a coral, there are like a very huge checklist that we need to consider before we can do the real thing. And the challenge was that like nobody going to fund it. Like everybody wants to do the real action, jump in the ocean, swimming, diving, and plant a coral, but not the checklist, the paperwork, or the discussion earlier. However, I'm optimistic that with that kind of interest of engagement, we can channel each and everybody in the right path, in the right direction. So all of the phases of the projects can be accomplished through their different interests. And I'm optimistic of that, although could not be funded through a grant, people who would like to learn about corals, about ocean is a lot, especially from the youth. And I would like to highlight, because Kezia was asking me what are the projects that I would like, maybe I'm prouding the most, and the highlight of the projects or the programs that we are working with. The programs that I'm proud of is called Scholar Reef, because it's actually answer the question how we are completed the checklist. So we are having the youth working with us, learning about corals, learning about measuring impacts, the baseline and everything. So everybody can be involved without need the big funding, but and people can enjoy, can love the activity. Unfortunately, not much doing that. So even though how many people diving, snorkeling, transporting the corals, if we don't do that, we cannot measure the impact. So I would like to promote this program even more. And actually the program is started when I involved in WIA. So the program actually is born when I joined the WIA program. So that's why I'm proud to serve this to all of the world, that we can involve so many people and involve in this measuring impacts and science movement for the corals itself.
Thank you so
Very
much.
optimistic.
Yeah, it's glowing from you. And welcome, Onofo.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so sorry that you had some trouble joining, but I'm so happy you're with us. We still have some time, so we'll just pass it over to you to just share a bit about who you are, the work that you do. And for all, Onofo is such an incredible leader in this space, empowering other women. So anything you'd like to share about that, we've covered all topics. So anything you'd like to contribute, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Kezia. Malo Lele, everyone. So honored and grateful, privileged to be part of these amazing conversations with you all, amazing and powerful women. And actually, in Davao, we have traveled with the internet. So this place, if you see the background, I drove around to find a good internet so I can connect with you all. That's the main issue and problem here. And I usually jump in and hear your conversation, but I can't connect. So I wrote message, that's why they opened me to jump on. Anyway, I am Captain Onofo Funagi Havea. I'm from a little village called Tuanuku on the beautiful island of Vava'o in the Kingdom of Tonga. Destiny has a way of finding us in a way we never imagined. As a young woman, I work as a weaver and clean ship to support my family. I was paid painfully little, and so I asked for more work. I went to a special school to become a cook. Women in my culture were usually never seen doing this task, but I had just a strong drive and work ethic doing this task. As I knew that's my true person, and what I knew most about and care about was driving boats and sailing. I wanted to break through the class ceiling that's holding women back from their true capabilities. I was the first woman of my culture to become a captain, and I strive for every kind of license. I received my yacht master from New Zealand, ship master from the US, from the Northeast Maritime. Language, they sail around the Pacific Island and all the way to the US. I'm a pioneer of the whale watching industry in Tonga and own a whale watching company specializing in waka and moana, whale swim. And then that's what I do. And also I established a non-profit organization called Tonga Waiting Society after the long voyage that I did in 2011 and 2012. A non-profit, and it's more like the Tonga Waiting Society is serving as a guardians of the oceans and teaching traditional navigation and sailing as they embrace the Tongan culture, values, and love of the sea. And I'm not done yet. I continue to endeavor to further my craft and love the oceans every day.
Thank you so much, Onofo. Yeah, it's such an incredible life story and journey and example for so many women. And I wonder if you just want to share as well too. I know many times when we speak, you're at trainings, you're training other women. You've run a crew of all women in the past sailing. If there's anything you want to share, we've been talking a lot about how can we lift up other women. And I think that's something that you live every day.
Well, that's in 2012, that's the history that we made after our long voyage all the way back from the US back to the South Pacific. That's a lot of women, 7 canoe, there is 1 or 2 or 3 women in each canoe. Say they feel like they're not strong enough. The way how they do work on board and everything they want to touch, the boys took over. And they feel like, what's happening here? Are we strong enough? Are we know what we're doing? And that's what started the story of why don't we get together all the women and try to see if we can do the same thing. And came to my mind because I was the only one who know how to do that. And then so that one was sparkling how we can show our strength, our value of something that the capability that we did know, and then we know a lot more, but because we don't showcase it. And in Tahiti, I led all women crew that's including all 17 different nationalities, and we run the whole show. And it's mean the world for all of us, because the feeling that we have, it's much stronger because us women, we have powerful. We make things work. And the way of working, it's different from how boys working, because everything's they listen. We learn to listen. That's one of the things. We learn to listen. We learn to help each other. We learn to work together. Unity is very much in harmony on board when all women are all together. We're sharing experience. We're sharing a lot of things that not everybody has it. And that's the true color of us women. When we are one board, we are in one boat, one home, one oceans, and we sail together toward a sustainable environment. And that's the things that all women, they never forget in their lifetime, something that they show the boys. We can pull the anchor, we can pull the line, we can pull the host to sail. We do navigation. We also training traditional navigation on board, all done by women, steering, everything. So there's a lot of memories that still those women were sharing with us in Onofo. It's never forget in our lives. It's a moment that women can step up and show the world. We can do anything. It doesn't matter how hard, it doesn't matter how rough the seas, how hard work to be done, but because
Oh no. Oh, I think we lost Onofo temporarily, but hopefully she comes back in just a moment. But yeah, just for context there too, it was a crew of 17 women, all women crew from 17 nationalities who did sail around the world or across the Pacific, have to confirm, but yeah, really showed that it was possible. And so incredible to have that really powerful remarks from Onofo as we close here. I think we're just a little bit over time, but Kahea and Tasha, if there's any final remarks, I know that we gave a lot of opportunity to talk about inspiration and optimism. Oh no. Well, yeah, I think what's also so real that Onofo shares is just the challenge of connectivity. And that's just something to keep in mind. Oh, yay.
Oh, sorry, kind of, but it's okay. So for us women on board, we bring luck. That's one of the most like listed women. A man doesn't understand it. We bring luck on board, and wherever company, wherever work you with, but as women, we need acknowledgement. We need acknowledgement because women benefit. Women bring women on the table to be part of the solution. Women are the solutions. I can say that. It doesn't matter because I prove it. Women, us, we think collectively, collective whole rather than ourselves. And then we are so powerful on organizations like companies. I'm talking about companies, ship owners. If like where I'm working, if you uplift your ladies, if you uplift women in anywhere you work, even you are in the government, on the ship, on a canoe, or non-profit organization, uplift women. The women move things. Women are stronger. They make things happen in all levels. Include women in decision making.
Yes.
And that's a symbol, but you know, is a lot of us have a different experience in different sides, but we make things happen.
Yeah.
So that's one of the powerful things I always share with men. Work hard. The determination is there. Don't lay back if you fail to do something, because if you fail, that's mean you want to try again.
Yeah, the tenacity. Thank you so much, Onofo. I know we have to pass it over to the next session is going to start, I think, on the same link maybe, but thank you so much for what you've shared. I think just to summarize briefly, women are able to listen, to collaborate when put in positions that we bring luck. We can be a necessary part of decision making. And there's so much more we're going to be consolidating into the key takeaways that we submit with the letter from all of these sessions. So thank you again, Onofo, Kahea, Tasha, for all the work that you do, and a virtual round of applause from the audience, please, for these amazing leaders. And yeah, look forward to continuing this effort all together.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Cassia.